Good evening, everyone. You are listening to Total Exposure with me, Vivian Quintero, and tonight we have an interview with Scott Philip Juergens, director of 29 Needles. Enjoy. Good evening, everyone. You are listening to Total Exposure with me, Vivian Quintero, and tonight we have an interview with Scott Philip Juergens, director of 29 Needles. Enjoy.
You haven't had the opportunity to see the movie yet, correct?
Yeah, it has not been, well, of course, I can't find it anywhere to watch it.
Right.
So, for me, I'm strictly doing this based on what I've read.
Okay.
Steven didn't get really in depth with it. I kind of, I allowed him to steer the conversation, and I think that's the same way as I kind of hope that you'll do, is not so much as you take control, but I want you to talk about specific things you want to talk about, and then go from there. There's like a little bit he talked about of the film, nothing to really give away any of the specific plots or storylines. I think what he did is he was trying to describe the whole too extreme mainstream thing.
Right.
And he just basically kind of gave me like a brief, a synopsis on some of the stuff, or actually not some, but one in particular thing in the film that really kind of guided it in that direction.
Okay. I imagine that would be the graphic sex.
No, actually not. I mean, for me, I don't know if you could really even get him to bat an eye at anything, but I think it was one of the parts the only part he really got into detail with was about the fisting part and the arm severing.
Yeah, there was that there.
And
that happens later on in the film, and really what the movie centers on is the character of Francis. Now, all the characters are named after surrealist painters.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I'm an artist myself, and I just thought that would be interesting, and it's a very surreal type film, and I kind of just thought that would be an interesting thing. But everybody ends up with like names that aren't your typical name. Like Francis isn't necessarily a name that you hear a lot in for a guy in a movie.
Right.
But then there's like Dorothea, and is another name, and Eve. Like the French Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was a variety of names that I used in there, and it follows this character, and I developed this character based upon the idea of combining maybe the mind of a person that would be a serial killer of kinds,
mm-hmm.
Somebody that might find pleasure in killing somebody, but combining that with somebody that more is a bit fetishistic, has that type of element that of the bondage, domination, S&M community,
Sure.
where it is all in a safe environment. So I was trying to find this middle ground of somebody that might use some of that to derive pleasure and go further and further with that. So I don't know if that even exists, but I just kind of thought that would be like an interesting road to travel down and see if there is what kind of overlap. So developing the character, I went that direction, and I was very specific to point out in dialogue that what this character is doing doesn't really fall under the bondage, domination, S&M community's scope. He's doesn't really feel like he associates with that because they are restricted, and he wants to go into new territory or further. So, and I'm going to refer to the character as he because Brooke plays a male character, and although Brooke transitioned to a woman later in her life, a couple years ago, and I feel like based upon conversation that this possible involvement of this movie really helped Brooke explore more of herself and decide and realize that this is really who she is. Not that character, but a woman. And I'm happy that that opened that her mind in that direction. But it wasn't. I wasn't aware of it at the time when we were filming and making the movie. But that scene that you mentioned that Stephen was talking about, that is something that is one of those things that I based on things that I have heard, and I've heard there's an amputation fetish out there, and sometimes it involves not just a lot of it's for people that have are amputees, but there's even like people that will be willing to remove a part of their body in it for sexual gratification for both the giver and receiver of that. And I tried to incorporate that in a very bizarre way in the film. So yeah. Without going into too many details or spoilers, that's certainly what we achieved. And there was that effect that we used that had to be really be adjusted because we weren't able to do it the way we were initially going to do it, which would be more which would have been more graphic. The amputation, you would have seen more of the actual severing of the flesh and bone, but there had to be more left up to the imagination because at that point in time that was like one of the last scenes that we shot, and our FX crew had to go their own ways at that point in time. The movie took about 2 years to film, and everybody was working for free. So all the budget went into the makeup effects, and I would obviously paid for all those materials, but I wasn't able to compensate them for their time because we all just worked for free. Right. So they had to move on with their own projects, and it was just getting lengthy. So I had to kind of use some camera trickery and some leftover props that I had from other stuff to make it work. And I feel like it does, and with the cutaways and stuff. So yeah, that I guess was a scene that was very interesting, and I was very lucky in that that I found a person for that scene that was born without a hand. So it worked out really well.
Well, I think that when you use the idea of allowing the mind to generate more of what happens over like portraying it, I think that it can go pretty haywire, if you know what I mean. I mean, people can get their imaginations going pretty easily when it comes to stuff like that. And I actually like that idea. I like the idea that you allowed the imagination to create its own image over trying to just groom the shock and awe kind of approach to it.
Right. And
I mean, of course, I haven't seen the film yet, for which I am super, super excited about seeing it. I, for one, am an individual that I don't go that far into sexuality in a sense, but it has there, I've done, not to get like super personal or anything like that, but I've done like cutting and stuff like that that's been sensual in my eyes. And so when I saw this, I was really intrigued by it. So yeah, and so it's difficult to find a partner that really gets into stuff like that. Hence, I'm single.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I went from that as well, because I think a lot of people start with that and in that direction, and I feel like with Brooke, Brooke smoked, and I think that common thing for somebody that might have these self-harm kind of fetishes of sorts, a lot of times you'll find that those people have sometimes put a cigarette out on their skin to see what that feels like, or to experience that level of alertness and pain in regards to that, to kind of feel alive in that sense. And that was one of the only things that was real in the movie, and it doesn't look that real. It was when he actually burnt himself in the arm with the cigarette, and he's like, yeah, let me do that. And I said, well, we can make that. And he's like, no, I've done it all the time. So I was like, okay. So that was the only thing that was really real in the movie. Some of the stuff looked like it actually happened, and some of the stuff Brooke wanted to go forward with, in regards to the title, 29 Needles. There are some needles that are inserted in the skin at some point, and I know that happens with people all the time, and they do that, but in regards to the setting of being a director and on a movie, I didn't want to be something to go wrong and possibly have to end up in a hospital because of it. So we made everything look like it was happening and sound like it was happening without it actually happening. So I think that that includes cutting, which there's a bit of that in the movie. But there have been people, because I think that the gore in the movie isn't overt. It's not like, there are a lot more movies. It's pretty tame in regards to gore, but I think that tone and the way that I was going with the direction of the film really put it into the extreme category because of subject matter and the way it's portrayed, and in regards to the story that I really created in this setting as well.
The thing was, that was something that I was going to ask you about in that perspective of it. Do you honestly consider this? I mean, your perspective on it, of course, it would fall into the too extreme for mainstream kind of mentality, I suppose. But do you find it to be extreme? I mean, because I don't. For me personally, hearing you speak about it, I find it to be actually very romantic in a lot of ways because of the intimacy that can go into it between two people. I don't think it's so much the violence, but the sensuality and experience and to feel.
I think that because this is the way that the film is portrayed in the character, it's not a romantic element whatsoever.
Okay.
It's more about a tortured soul, and it almost parallels this self-harm, this obliteration of oneself, and how you're almost unable to stop, like an addiction, like an extreme addiction, and where that is so it comes from that, and it really stems from that, which creates this very bleak and somber quality throughout the entire film. Because I don't know, you can tell from the trailer that there's a couple lines that are used, but the specific idea is that he feels like he's falling, and a lot of people, when they feel like they're falling, they kind of want to stop it. But he's like, I want to see the bottom. I want to know where it leads me. So that's the idea, where it's like he's uninhibited in his self-destruction, and he just kind of wants to see where that takes him. So that's the kind of, and in regards to horror, I think that somebody else asked me, is this a horror film actually? And I would say, what is horror to people? What is horror to people? Certainly, a lot of the elements in it are horrific, and what he does is horrific, and what he does to others and himself, it's horrific. Some people may feel like, oh, well, it's more of a drama character study that's very bleak, and I'm fine with that. And some might be like that it's horror, or it's thriller, or it's just a psychosexual kind of drama. I would say it's all of those things, and I'm really not I wasn't trying to create something that would fit if it didn't have to. I just was creating something, and where it fit genre-wise, if it even fit, is where it landed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't think that it has to be specifically gory or bloody, or you have to have a monster or a actual killer in a film to be considered horror. I do like your perspective of it, because I think that once you start pigeonholing things, such as this film here, or really any other film that tries to take this more of a as they call it, a slow burn kind of psychological examination of how one can go from one point to the next, and and cross that boundary where most people, like you said, when they start falling, they want to stop this. I think that could be literally, like, the human condition is the most horrifying thing, I believe, possible. It overshadows slasher, it overshadows monster, it overshadows anything, because I really truly believe, like, the human condition is the most horrific and the most unparalleled to any type of imagination or imaginary scenario one can think of.
Yeah, I agree, and that's when I'm writing, and when I'm working on with my next project as well. It's really about the people and who they are and why they make their decisions, and how that can be horrific at times, and sometimes it's choices, so that I feel like resonates with me, what you said, and I agree with that, is that it's very much the human element is the horrific part of it, and you'll find with most like specifically like a zombie movie, let's say. Yeah, there's zombies going all around and eating and mangling, but usually the worst part is what the people that are alive do to each other, and that's where the horror generally comes in. So.
But see, I think that's why people tend to try to try to put the veil back over, and they don't want to. I mean, if humanity at this point in time strips away all of that and looks at the purity of the uninhibited behavior that a lot of people engage in, it would be so horrific there would be no way anybody could speak of it.
Right. And I think that that was part of what I was going for as well. I moved to San Francisco from Baltimore at the age of 20. I met my husband when I was 19, and we've been together together since, and that was in 1993. And I had friends here in Baltimore that before I came out that I knew were gay, and we were friends and fine with that before I came out. And then so I was exposed to the scene here in Baltimore, but then quickly left, and then moved to San Francisco, and that's just kind of like it's outrageous, And I ended up working at a video store, and you see all types of people because it was a mixture of all types of movies as well as adult films.
Right.
So, there's a lot of personality that comes in, and you see a lot of different types of people, especially when I was there working in the Castro and the different festivals. And I had a good friend that was living with people that had a dungeon in their house that they would rent out for people to come and experience that. And people came from all over the world. I guess it was pretty well renowned. And that isn't my scene,
right.
But I found it fascinating. I really, really found it fascinating. I mean, there's like the water torture that they're doing up there, and people sleeping in cages, and the electric chair and the shower. It was just all there. I'm like, this is normal for a lot of people, and I thought it was really interesting. And people, you don't know what people are doing, and the people that would come in and check out these movies and you see what they're looking at, and I thought that was wonderful and fascinating that, most person walking down the street wouldn't think anything about this person. They would think, they're, just vanilla, normal homemaker, and then, they have that side of them. And another story that I told some other people in regards to an interview was how I came across one of my first early extreme horror films by babysitting, and they were like, we got a bunch of VHSs, you can just watch whatever you want. And like, wow. You wouldn't expect like this in this the average normal home, which is what I feel like it's such a misconception. I feel like there are so many people with these layers that they protect themselves and create this image, when really, if you remove all that and just expose yourself raw, then what is that? What is normal? What is not normal? And I feel like that's what I was kind of really creating with this environment as well. And the story was, these people in that, there's a variety of people that you see, and putting all these people in, it just felt very normal, these different types, and it wasn't for necessarily like shock or whatever.
Right.
It was just, these are the people that I kind of was around, and some of them were like people that were, the idea that they're friends, that they were friends that I knew, and the characters might have been based upon some of that and distorted a bit. So it wasn't necessarily like I needed to create this to kind of build this shock or this subversity. It was just, this is what I see around, and this is the way it is, and I just let the camera just go wherever the attention was, even if it was not where a camera normally went in most films.
Yeah, see, I think, and that's where I hold a lot of regard and respect for you, is that a lot of people won't go to, they get an idea and they tend to want to take the steps to create this idea, but they want to do it in the most mundane way. They don't want to get too in depth with certain things. They don't want to cross that line to make it more explicit. And like literally, one of my favorite artists of all time, Joel Peter Witkin, he is a person such as, he takes that side of where society deems it as absurdity, and he places this most gorgeous perspective on things, and still people don't don't see it. And even though you're not, it seems like even though you're not going for that whole like character study, which I think is actually quite refreshing. I also think that it's also refreshing to see that you're able to and you're willing to do that. Like even though people aren't going to know this when they see the film, these are people that you know, not to this extreme possibly, but you did experience, and how very normal it is for people to have these type of fetishes. It's the ones that are willing to express it and not so much draw attention to themselves, but to be feeling like they're being transparent with the world, and not keep everything so secretive anymore. And that was one of the biggest things that pulled me towards one, your film, and two, wanting to do this interview, is that, you know, I just absolutely adore Joel Peter Witkin's work, and I have a lot of documentaries with him. I mean, I even own a couple of books that have been published and by Witkin, and that is the type of world I surround myself with.
Well, it's beautiful. His work is beautiful.
Absolutely.
And the photography, what he transposes and creates are very brutal but beautiful, and that's kind of always been my aesthetic, is beauty in the horrific. And I also kind of I like just creating an environment that is outside of what you might normally find in a genre.
Right.
You know, so I kept a lot of, there's obviously some dark and shadowy elements that keep mystery, but then there's also a lot of stuff that's very much out in the open and exposed and just raw, and there's beauty in that too, and horror, and so yeah, I can understand there's a similar aesthetic, and I do appreciate that as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Do you when you first started to construct the idea of 29 films, what was it like? Literally, I mean, it's a very apparent. I mean, once I, you know, the second I discovered this film and I started doing research, like just kind of searching for things about you, and if you had done anything else, like other films, and things of that manner, I noticed that this is like literally basically your first. So what was it? What was it? The idea of, I mean, I actually work with film as well, and I'm just starting out. And I kind of wanted to know, like, between, like, you, to me, like, what was it that gave you that drive to go in this direction with this film?
Well, it's kind of a two-part answer. So I would say, first of all, I have loved film and wanted to be a filmmaker since I was a teenager.
Same here.
And I made, as a teenager, a bunch of shorts that were just absurd, just with friends, and sometimes we would just do them in one day, and there was no editing.
Right.
It was all in-camera editing. So you would shoot the scene in the order, and it was all on tape and stuff. So we would have fun, and just like that's what I would do for fun. And we'll make a short today, and they were all like comedic horror, which I'm not personally a huge fan of.
Neither am I.
But creating them was fun. You know, just being like, I mean, I was a teenager and it was stupid. And it was almost like you're just making fun of the tropes in the horror genre as well. But we just having fun with it, obviously. So that's where I came from, and that was my idea. And then I moved to San Francisco and just got away from film a little bit and started getting more into or back into art, because I also paint, and so I was working on that. And then I really wanted to, after we moved from San Francisco, we went to Boston, and I really wanted to get back into film and creating film, and I didn't have any background, but I figured I just would teach myself. So I learned what I could on my own, and I took a class where we shot on actual 16 millimeter film, and had to edit and splice a couple shorts, which still haven't ever seen the light of day. But so I learned a little bit about that, and then I just kind of started being a production assistant and getting into the industry, and then I ended up buying my own equipment and just deciding. My husband's was in the Coast Guard, so we would move around. So I kind of thought, if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to do it on my terms, and I can't go to New York, and I'm not going to go to Hollywood.
Right.
I got to go where my husband's going, wherever that may be. And so I was inspired by people that were able to create film outside of industry standards. And in places more like guerrilla filmmaking style.
Right.
And just figure, they can do it, I can do it, so I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to buy my equipment, because that's generally a huge cost of renting equipment. So if I just buy it, I will have it forever, and that'll be an absorbed cost. So then I was just playing around with stuff, and then I just like, okay, I got to do something with this, and I just created a story, and I realized that I don't have the budget for this story, and so I thought, what can I do to raise some money that might get me to do this? And I was brainstorming, and that's where the idea of 29 Needles came. I was exploring some serial killers, and America's first serial killer is Albert Fish, who was a horrific person. And if you do a little bit of research on him, you'll discover why.
Yeah, he's not a lovely person at all.
Not at all. So there was the subtle reference to the title 29 Needles comes from Albert Fish, and it's not directed at specifically what the character does, what Albert Fish does, but the fact that Albert Fish did insert needles into himself, and when he was caught, they found 29 needles in his body. So that's where that title came from, was that there's a similarity in that in the main character, but that's where the similarity stops. So, but I just thought that was really interesting, and that was where the serial killer kind of developed, and pain, pleasure, principle, those type of things combined with the bondage domination. So I just kind of created this story that just kind of just organically developed, and then when I kind of had it in my mind, I was like, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, well, if I have no money, and I'm going to do it, then how am I going to find people willing to do it?
Right.
And I just thought, well, I will go to the type of people that would want to be on film for free, doing this type of thing. So I scoured the internet, putting ads out and placing, different ads like on Craigslist personals. A lot of them will get taken down because they don't want that type of stuff up there, but it was productive enough that it would get responses. So I would say that out of all the responses that I got, probably 20% panned out, and those people I ended up interviewing and talking to, and just kind of meeting in person to see what they're willing to do, and also to find out a little bit about themselves, and then eventually seeing if they could handle any type of dialogue, and then go from there. And that's how I found the main character, Brooke. Was actually from a posting that I did on MySpace, so you can tell how long.
Oh yes, MySpace.
Yeah. So MySpace, and Brooke was just this like punk rock attitude guy that was like a friend of many friends of mine, but I never had met personally, but finally eventually did and interviewed and quickly realized that Brooke was the lead, and so that really helped shape the story, and I ended up having to eliminate a couple story points and characters because I wasn't able to find everybody that could handle any dialogue.
Oh, no.
So, it just happens. People are working for free. I mean, I certainly know that there's plenty of great actors and actresses in Baltimore, but I don't have access to them because not a lot of them want to work for free, and also with potentially unspecific shooting schedule and time frames. So, and so there was a little bit of reworking of the script because of what we had, and but it all worked out for the best. It turned out to be what I created. But that's how it shaped itself. And I just thought, God, when I was done, I was like, I had this idea of what I wanted movie-wise. And I said, okay, I'm not going to stop myself from filming anything that I feel like would get me exposure.
Right.
I said, I'm just going to make what I want, and then if people end up seeing it somehow and liking it, then that's great. But I'm not going to alter what my vision is in order to make it accessible to different distributors or whatever. I just figured if it's of interest, then I'll find the places that want to see it or show it or whatever. So that was my mentality, and in going into that. And then when I was done, I'm like, God, I think I've made an unwatchable movie that nobody's gonna ever want to see this movie. And and not just that maybe they don't want to see it, but specifically that they might never have the opportunity to see it because it would never get out there because who's going to show it and how would I get distribution or anything like that.
Of course.
But I was like, I'll just see, and that was my mentality all along. Just do it. If you want to do it, and you kind of maybe the right things will attract like a magnet,
Oh, absolutely.
so